If you've never seen me before, I'm reviewing all of the Scream films, then we're going to watch 7, rank them all. So if you like that type of content, like the video and join us down below. So Scream 3, very weird movie because I feel like in a vacuum, if you've never seen a Scream film before and someone said, oh yeah, watch that, you probably watch and go, okay, I understand what the movie's about. It's kind of the same thing, right? But then if you watch these movies back to back and you've seen all of them and you know how they play out, I don't feel like Scream 3 feels anything like Scream 1 and 2. I also have to point out, to my knowledge, Scream 3 is universally the most hated film in this franchise. In fact, I think it's the only one with a pretty negative score on Rotten Tomatoes. On one hand, there are some things I'm like, oh yeah, I love that. That's very centric to what Scream's all about. That's pretty cool. Then on the other hand, I'm like, what the fuck were we thinking? That is a catastrophe. Like, fire everybody. Scream 3, once again, directed by Wes Craven, stars Neve Campbell, David Arquette, Courteney Cox, and a bunch of others. And in this one, they are making a stab movie where they're trying to emulate what happened in Scream 1 and 2. They've hired a bunch of people to play our legacy characters. When a new Ghostface is back, he's killing off the cast and he's decided to make a movie of his own. I'm just going to rip the band-aid off and start off with my core issues of this film. I don't think this movie has good characters at all. I think the supporting cast is pretty terrible. These like stunt double characters playing our legacy characters, don't really find them very funny, and they are a huge part of the movie. I also don't think Neve Campbell as Sidney Prescott is in this movie at all. This is one of these weird scenarios where, yeah, she's in the movie, but she's not really in the movie. Like the first half of this movie, she's hiding off in like Witsec or just hiding out somewhere where Ghostface can't find her. And for that reason, our central backbone of this franchise is not in the movie. So like, what are we going to do? What we end up doing is following Dewey and Gale as they investigate on their own as these characters in the movie start getting killed off, which kind of detaches us from the stakes of this franchise we normally have. We're constantly worried about our main characters. Is it going to be Dewey? Is it going to be Sidney? We don't have to worry about any of them for the first half of the movie because they're killing off characters we don't give a shit about. But backtracking to the opening of this film, I actually think the opening of this movie is probably better than number 2. I don't mind the opening of this film at all with Liev Schreiber's character. I think it's actually pretty creative what they have with Ghostface. In this movie, we find out his little voice box he uses, he can manipulate it, fake he's using their voice. Now that could be a lot of fun, right? It's a wrinkle on Ghostface we haven't seen yet up until this point. And you could do a lot of stuff by manipulating people over the phone with his phone calls. And I just think that premise is completely underutilized in this movie, but it's still cool enough in theory. Now, my favorite thing about this film is probably the fact that a lot of it takes place on movie sets. And being a huge film nerd, I mean, I have a YouTube channel for fuck's sake. I think all of that stuff is pretty cool. Is it fully utilized like the majority of this film? No, but the concept, much like the opening's concept and almost all of the stuff I'm going to say in this conceptually, kind of cool. That's why it's kind of strange that a lot of it doesn't work. For a franchise that treats itself so smart when it comes to tropes and it's so meta aware of what's going on in the horror genre, this is a movie that falls victim to a lot of those tropes. You have a lot of dream sequences here. You have a lot of hallucinations here. Is it real? Is it not real? Doing that to build suspense, which at this point in the franchise feels a little bit lazy and played out because they never needed to do it up until this point. Dewey and Gale are back here. They're okay. Their chemistry bouncing back and forth off one another to a degree. What ends up happening in this movie, their relationship of how it starts to ends, feels very unearned. It feels like it kind of suffers from trilogy-itis, which is another thing this movie does. Much like the sequel, you have a tape from Randy, who is now gone, giving them the clues of what goes on in a trilogy and how the movie as a trilogy has to play out. And it doesn't really feel like it ever fully expands on that. They tell you the rules of what a trilogy should be doing, but it doesn't really feel like it naturally plays out. There's just little like checklist items of the trilogies they put into the movie, but it's never really cohesive. Which segues me to one of my biggest issues with this movie. This movie is very meta, probably more meta than number 2. It's very self-aware how silly we've gotten now to like the 10th degree, making a movie within a movie within a movie. But it feels like in this movie, at least this is how I feel, that a lot of the commentary and the zip and the humor is very flat in this one. A lot of the laughs we got in number 2 are now gone. They're starting to feel generic. It feels like a lot of the lines here are forced lines to keep that gig going. At this point, it feels like we're just kind of making plot out of the commentary, which means we're not dealing with Sidney in the core plot, which means we kind of don't care. Which leads me back to what I already said. I think the side characters in this film, like the detectives and the stunt doubles, all very forgettable. I don't know their names every time I come back to it. Don't care by the end of it. At this point in the franchise, we are building up characters to slaughter them. We don't give a shit. Which is kind of odd because this movie is so vocal about the fact that a conclusion to a trilogy no holds bar. Anything can go. The characters can die, but it feels like this movie is very scared of ruining any of their core. So on one hand, you're kind of like, okay, this is a trilogy. This is where it all ends. You got to do this. You got to wrap it up. But on the other hand, when I watch this, I feel like this is a trilogy that was very non-committed as we would go on to see, because we have 3 more movies after that. So it feels like an unfinished trilogy more than it feels like a concluded trilogy, which is why I feel like for what this movie was trying to do, it does not age very well. You know, when you watch a TV show and you're like, oh, that first season was awesome. Can't wait for season 2 to come back. And then you're like, oh, fuck, they canceled the show. That's kind of how this movie feels. It feels like they had an idea for how to end the trilogy, but their hands were tied because they didn't want to cut off the money source in case they ever kept the franchise going, which they did. Which leads to what we got, a suffering third act of a trilogy that is neither a conclusion nor a fulfilling movement into the 4th entry. All of this leads up to my biggest gripe with this movie overall. It's the fact that this movie has an insane amount of exposition. It feels like this movie is almost nothing but exposition. Whereas number 2 was funny when it talked, this movie just has characters outright explaining the plot to you because they have no idea how to introduce it, because there's no way they could naturally do it. So there's a plot line in this movie about Sydney's mother dying. People who are dying are having pictures of her left at the scene. You know something is going on. But when I watched this movie, not gonna lie, I was both confused and pretty fucking bored because I didn't care about any of the characters who die, and there's less deaths in this movie, I would say, than 1 and 2. So it's like, I don't care about these characters. I don't understand where this plot came from. Sydney is not in the movie for the majority of it. I'm pretty sure most of the legacy characters aren't going to die, which shoehorns in who I know is going to die. And there's so much talking in between the major events of this film, and the major events for the most part are not done that well, that it feels pretty boring. Now, I will say this, when you get to the final 20 minutes of the film, this is the great contrast I have of number 2. I don't really mind the ending of this movie. I think the final 10-15 minutes, I think it's better than 2's conclusion. The motivations behind the killer make more sense. It doesn't really explain how you get there, but I don't really mind because it's so much better than the rest of the film. It's one of those comparative things you go, this is the best part of the movie. Well, I don't really take issue with the way this movie ended as a trilogy, all the way up into the final scene, which is a little bit weird, but again, leaves the door open, no pun intended, for what could possibly come. So the ending of the movie doesn't bother me, and since the ending of the Scream films are usually the best part of the movies, I'm like, sure, movie's okay, I guess. If I had to summarize it very briefly, I would say Scream 3 is just kind of forgettable. I never really care to come back and watch this movie unless I'm marathoning the films or doing a series like that or something. So I understand why people are so vocally adamant that this movie is not good at all, because the standard across the board of Scream has been set so high. It feels like such a steep decline compared to the other ones. That being said, though, as somebody who watches way too many horror films, in the giant ecosystem of horror, it's not really that bad of a sequel. It just feels like by comparison, it's very, very bad. It has a couple of cool kills. Other than that, I think this movie, as I just said, is kind of forgettable. It just feels like the entry of this franchise. There's really no motivation to ever watch because they're all so similar in their own way. So using my rating system, I'd say wait for streaming, but this is by no means the worst horror sequel ever. So if you clicked on this video, I'm going to assume you've seen the Scream franchise. And if you have, comment down below. Let me know what you think of Scream 3. And I'm going to put a link up here at some point to the other Scream reviews. You can check those out. I will see you in the next review. Peace.